Hello dear friends, let's talk about problems of Opel Vectra B. After 1999, a redesign of the Opel Vectra B was made, so the owners of these models say most of the problems are gone. When buying a Opel Vectra B, pay special attention to the suspension and complete electronics in the car. Also, the everlasting Opel problem is rust, so check the rear ones, which are usually the first to be damaged. Redesigned Vectras have better suspension, so there should be no major problem in this field. But when buying, listen to the engine, because any creakings or thumping indicates a potential problem with the water pump and ultimately the engine and gearbox. These failures are not as costly as, say, an air conditioner malfunction, so check it properly. The clutch is also susceptible to faster wear and tear, so while it is not an expensive replacement part, make sure it is fully functional. According to the factory, the timing belt changes every 65 kilometers. I think it's 65,000 kilometers. So take a look at the service booklet, because if it breaks, it can destroy the entire engine. As for the engine, the last problematic is the petrol engine, 1.6 liter, 100 horsepower and 75 horsepower, and 1.7 diesel with 82 horsepower, borrowed from Isuzu. While the 1.6 liters, 100 horsepower variant still somehow works, the other two engines interfere with slowdown traffic on the road. There are, of course, more powerful units, from petrol to 116, 125 HP, 1.8 liters, 2.0 liters, and 2.2 liters, 136 horsepower, 147 horsepower. Especially the last two engines are quite brisk, but unfortunately they break down. The EGR valve often clogs and the ignition system fails and various sensors. Also, don't panic, you should check the oil gauge from time to time to see if there is any oil. These three engines drink oil. They give good performance and nice sound and give nothing more. Opel Vectra B 1.6 16V. The engine has shut down and there is no spark on the bobbins, spark plugs. The reason may be the mass of the bobbin body. Opel Vectra B 1.6 16V. Engine power loss, no motor error in memory. Check crankshaft pulley for damage. Crankshaft pulley is where crankshaft strap goes, if crankshaft pulley needs replacement. What's worse is that the famous gasoline engines are 1.8 16V, 2.0 16V, and 2.2 16V. In their case, there is always a malfunction of the crankshaft and camshaft sensors. The problem is mainly related to the 2.0 16V engine, such as bursting of the exhaust manifold, clogged EGR valve, failure of the water pump, coolant leakage, and failure of the ignition system components. Opel Vectra B 1.8 16V crankshaft sensor and camshaft break down frequently. The symptoms of this cam sensor malfunction are engine speeds, throttle shutdowns, or increased fuel consumption often vary. The symptoms of the crankshaft sensors are: the engine starts harder and weighs more than 4,000 RPM. The 1.8 16V throttle motor can get stuck from oil vapors. Usually just clean it. If you opt for 101 horsepower, 16 valves, 1.6 liter engine version, then you must take into account the fact that at any time there may be damage to the EGR valve or unexpected problems with the timing belt, so you should shorten the interval between timing belt replacement and 4/2. With 2.2 or 2.0 liter diesel engines with direct injection, there are problems with poor fuel pumps, compressor control valve, and very often the head gasket is damaged. Engine shaking, idle wrong. Car hard to start when cold. Check coolant temperature sensor and connect at coolant temperature sensor. There will be poor connection due to vibration. The Opel Vectra B 2.0 DTI can start badly in the morning, caused by a zero ring in the quick release fuel filter connector. The fuel returns to the tank when the air in the system empties the filter, and it takes a long time to start the engine. The remedy is the new O-rings and, as a protection, a non-return valve in the fuel tank line. DI16V. What happens is the oil collects in the 16V head of the engine and it takes a long time to return the oil to the crankcase. Check the oil after an hour after the engine has shut down and you will get a false low oil level reading, which leads you to refuel the engine with fresh oil. DT motor. Whistling from the turbine occurs during the filling phase, leaks either the exhaust branch gasket or the exhaust branch. Servo pump failure approximately 35 kilometers. Vectra B from the first 2 years of production were also known as to have problems with the fuel hoses spraying from the hoses, which Opel solved with a free service call. When buying, pay special attention to all pumps for fuel and other, as complaints about cancellation of these parts were not so rare. Toothed belts on 4-cylinder 16V engines have the problems that the water pump pulley pulls off the toothed belt, so it is best to change the water pump when the toothed belt is changed. Manufacturer's recommendation for 8-valve engines to replace the gear belt at 120 kilometers or every 8 years, and as for engines, every 16 or every 4 years, every 16,000 kilometers or every 4 years. Voltage strikes from the alternator damage the camshaft sensor. This is prevented from changing the engine wiring. The crankshaft and camshaft wiring is separate from the alternator wiring. June 2000, V6 model recall due to crankshaft failure. Problems: a clutch failure may not be due to a failure of the return valve in the pipeline, but rather a failure of the clutch master cylinder or clutch cylinder on the transmission. If there is something pounding in the Vectra from the rear, it is probably the pounding of the fuel tank, which was resolved on the 1980s versions. Until 1999, body corrosion protection was not the best. The situation improved after the 1999 rebuild. There were no major problems with the electrical devices on the vehicle. Sometimes the windows on the door and the central locking simply do not work. The instrument panel will turn on and off the lights for no reason. Another problem is the disappearing text on the screen. Sometimes the ABS is malfunctioning, which is usually caused by damage to one of the wheel sensor. A common cause is the failure of the cables from the wheel sensors. Minor body problems were found in some 5-door versions, where water was leaking into the boot. A common problem with the first Opel Vectra B was steering wheel jams, when troughs are often injured, stabilizers forward and damping silent blocks back.
Don't forget to subscribe my channel, and if you're the owner of this car, then share your experience. It will help others to choose a car. Goodbye.